Urshifu has Aqua Jet, whereas Dylan's has Ice Spinner.
Yep. Ice Spinner is an interesting move. It's probably not really going to come into play here. Like, it hits the Whimsicott on Don's team, I guess, but otherwise, nothing super crazy. So you look at Don's achievements, 2024 Charlotte Regional, and then before that, it had a few years, with the pandemic and everything. But previous Worlds competitor, top cut several, top cut a couple regionals. Looking at his team here, he does have the, really innovative, or I guess going back to basics, Palmot, Clefairy, popularized by Wolf at the start of this format. Clefairy, Calyrex Shadow Rider, a very, very strong team.
Something to note is actually we have a use of where Ice Spinner could come in clutch here. We have on Dawn's Whimsicott, it actually has Misty Terrain as an anti-Amoonguss option.
That's true.
It is just the coverage move on the Urshifu Rapid Strike for Dylan Stone, but Ice Spinner can actually remove that terrain and start putting other things to sleep.
Yeah, so in a pinch, there is a usage case for that. Whether it'll come up, we'll see. The Urshifu is probably actually reasonably well positioned here. It hits the Palmont hard. It hits the Calyrex reasonably hard. It hits the Ursaluna if the Ursaluna decides to come.
Another Stellar Pelipper.
Yep, Stellar Pelipper. This time, Protect. Earlier in the day, we had a bunch of Pelipers that were
Terra Ghost for Fake Out, and
yeah, they were
block Fake Out and Paint.
They were Terra Ghost Tailwind. This time we're back to Stellar Terra Protect. So just a lot of offense, and protecting moves. So pretty bread and butter for Pelipper.
I think an interesting thing that you pointed off camera while we were waiting for the top 8 to start is an interesting thing that goes on with Pelipper running Terra Stellar is you actually can almost cheat out extra Terra type boosts due to the weather because of how Terra Stellar works.
Yep. So basically how that works is since Weather Ball is a variable type attack, if it's a water, when it's in rain, it's a water attack, so you get a stellar boost off that. If it turns sunny all of a sudden, it turns into a fire type attack, you get a stellar boost off of that. And if it's a normal type, then with no weather, then it also turns out that it would just be a Terra Stellar normal attack.
I was gonna say, where's the move like that correlates with his terrain? That's just Nature Power.
Oh yeah, Terrain Pulse. Yeah, it's Terrain Pulse, Nature Power, Secret Power. Secret Power hasn't been in the game for a while, but still. So both players are loading in the game. Looks like they've already made it through Team Preview, and here we go. So it's going to be Urshifu and Incineroar for Dylan, and Clefairy and Ursaluna Blood Moon. So a change up from what we saw earlier from Dawn. We're going to see the Ursaluna Blood Moon deployed early this time. Threatens a lot of damage. So we're going to see what Dawn's got queued up here. It looks like Dawn has some defensive counterplay queued up if his selections were accurate. Dylan thinking through his turn.
Yeah, this is actually the first time we've seen Dawn pull up the Ursaluna today.
Yep. It like we were saying earlier, it kind of fills a role where it doesn't come to a whole lot of games, but the games it does, you just kind of want to matchup check with it. Or it may just be that Dawn thinks that he misassessed the matchup earlier, and this is what he needs to do. That being said, regardless, we're going to have the Ursaluna Blood Moon switch out into the Urshifu, and Clefairy clicks Protect. So now Dylan is going to start his turn with the Surging Strikes, and we'll see what the Incineroar follows up with after this damage. With Friend Guard and the Resistance, Urshifu is taking pretty negligible damage. So, yeah, ultimately...
That's like some of the least I've seen an Urshifu hit for in a long time.
Yeah, it's not a lot of damage, but we get a Parting Shot out. Urshifu's attack and special attack will drop 1 stage. Ultimately, if you're clicking Surging Strikes, doesn't really matter, but the Incineroar gets in, gets out safely, and now we're on to, whatever Dylan's switch in is going to be. A lot of good options between the Calyrex, Amoonguss, even Pelipper is probably not bad here. So yeah, we'll see.
I like the Pelipper on. We see the Calyrex Ice Rider coming in.
Calyrex comes out. The Calyrex is Terra Water, so it does have the ability to resist Surging Strikes. So that's an important thing to note. So yeah, like a lot of defensive counterplay for Dylan right now. He's not really under threat of too much damage. But we'll just have to see, specifically how he wants to position his team around trying to whittle things down You know, we've already seen 3 of Dylan's Pokemon, so in theory, he only brought so far 1 resistance to Astral Barrage. So it is possible that, you know, if the last Pokemon is either Pelipper or Farigiraf, it could be pretty solid into the Calyrex. Otherwise, it could be looking at taking a lot of damage. So we're going to see the Instant switch back in. Clefairy's going to click Follow Me. And let's see what the Urshifu is going for. Just U-turn out, get a little bit of chip damage down on the Calyrex. You know, every 10% matters.
If you're in Don's position right now, I'd be worried about an incoming Glacial Lance.
Maybe.
Especially now that the Instin's in position to click a Fake Out as well.
Could be a cheeky read. So Ursaluna comes in, and high horsepower. Okay, so high horsepower into the Clefairy. You get a little bit of damage. You know, not bad. So now with full Fake Out pressure, it's safe. I'm gonna say you're under really no pressure to do anything other than double protect, unless you're in a position where you just want to start making reads. But it looks like the Instant was not switching out, so there's not going to be any positioning changes for Dylan. So, you know, this turn is basically just a wash. We might go into Trick Room.
If Trick Room does go up, it now comes into a matter of how the Calyrex versus the Ursaluna's trained. Yeah. Unless Dawn just feels comfortable going for after you, with Clefairy having a much lower speed. Yeah. If the
Ursaluna, this type of team composition, I would be generally assuming that the Ursaluna is probably actually going to be pretty fast. So I'm assuming that's probably what it's going to be here as well. But Don is at a point where he can now, you know, queue up a lot of damage. And the Ursaluna is probably, like, unless the Instant is very, very fast, the Ursaluna could be trained to be faster than it. Ultimately, if the Incineroar wanted to be faster, it could be faster if it was trained that way, but it looks like the Ursaluna might be in position to pump out a lot of damage here.
It's actually crazy. We were talking about, like, just how a lot of Pokemon have, like, this, what we've just been calling, like, the really big, just the really big damage button.
Yeah. Ursaluna is one of those that gets a really big damage button.
And, like, for Pokemon that feels like a second restricted, Ursaluna is another one of those that just is up there.
Yeah.
Like, Helping Hand Blood Moon,
it's a bye-bye. Yeah, and he reads to Protect here. Calyrex goes for Protect. So if this was Blood Moon into the Instant, since the Instant is not Assault Vest, this should be a pretty comfortable knockout. Yep, and the Instant is bye-bye. So that's a pretty big knockout for Don to log.
The other thing, too, is, like, even Terra Ghost on the Instant there would not save you. Mind's Eye just...
Yep, Mind's Eye means that...
Mind's Eye is just scrappy.
Yep, it's going to hit all Ghost Pokemon as well. We're going to see Urshifu comes in. So there's still a good amount of pressure that Dylan is going to be able to put back on Don. But removing the Instant means also just removing a Ghost resistance. So, you know, that Calyrex that Calyrex Shadow Rider is still going to potentially be looming in the back, where it can just pump out a lot of damage if you can get it in position to not, you know, like not in Trick Room, not exposed. So
this is a very interesting dynamic for Don right now compared to how we seen him yesterday and even earlier today. He was using Calyrex before as just like the build everything around it and use that to advance your game.
Yeah.
We're looking at it now, and the Calyrex now is going from, like, the position of this, if Don brings it in the back, is going to be that of just the Pokemon that comes in and cleans up the game. Not even the fact of it can snowball.
Yeah.
It can clean up the game if
that Hyper Voice is so much damage.
Critical hit on the Calyrex as well.
Critical hit on the Calyrex specifically is a lot of bonus damage, and then the Urshifu was already -1, so it was probably going to knock out anyway. But to get a Glacial Lance coming in from the Calyrex, that is going to knock out the Clefairy and chunk the Ursaluna a little bit. But more importantly, not going into Trick Room here. So we get a Chilling Neigh boost on the Calyrex, but if there's a Calyrex Shadow Rider, then there's not really any good way for Dylan to actually get into Trick Room here. Like, even if this is Farigiraf.
This is Farigiraf.
Yeah, like, the Farigiraf has to live...
It has to live...
It has to live Terra Normal Blood Moon. And honestly...
even if it does,
There's also not necessarily any reason for Calyrex to click Astral Barrage. You can just click Pollen Puff Hyper Voice here,
oh yeah,
and that should probably pick up as well.
I know Don's probably very aware of like how bulky Fire Draft can be, given that in I believe it was round 3 that he was in.
Yeah, I believe it was. So we get a Protect from the Calyrex. That's about all you can do, because Hyper Voice cleans up as well, and you just kind of have to hope that Dawn doesn't go for specifically this move.
Ooh, and
so
then Pollen Puff picks up the one shot there.
Pollen Puff gets the one shot, so that's very interesting information for Dawn to know that he can go for Calyrex's coverage move, and the coverage move is still going to knock out the support Pokemon there. So ultimately, a really good, really strongly played endgame here.
Not only that, but it's also a really good information game for Dawn as well.
Yep. So that's going to be the concession from Dylan, and game 1 goes to Dawn. Looking to, up the ante. He won a PC yesterday. It'd be pretty cool to win an MSS today. Have a nice little 80-point weekend.
Obviously, that means if he goes into the next regional, that's the next step up after this.
Yeah,
if
exactly.
he does that today.
Exactly. So, watch out, everybody at LA. So, we'll see. That being said, Dylan is not out of this game yet. The matchup is not terrible for him. Don played against a similar matchup earlier. So,
adjusted very well.
Yeah, so Don has an adaptation to this ahead of time. So now it's going to be up to Dylan. What kind of changes do you think you'd be looking at? Is it just kind of like salty run back, or are we looking to change a bunch of things up, or what looks good to you?
I actually would respect the Blood Moon as well. I actually think Pelipper would be a really good option here, just because like you would force the Ursulin to clicking Blood Moon or basically an ineffective moves.
Mm-hmm.
There's just a lot of spread damage that can be threatened right now that I think Pelipper would do a really good job of just like stopping.
Okay.
If this Pelipper I don't think has Tailwind, unfortunately.
Yeah, this Pelipper is the Protect Wide Guard. It's 2 protects, 2 attacks, basically.
If they had Tailwind, then you'd use Pelipper as a potential option into matching Tailwinds.
Yeah.
However, I think you can work towards a mode with Bar Draft if you're able to redirect away.
Yeah, honestly, the big change is the Ursula, like Dawn deploying the Ursaluna instead of just relying on the Calyrex. Because the way that Dawn got beat earlier on camera, if anybody was watching, was that basically his opponent just kind of led the Farigiraf and just stuck the Farigiraf on that part of the board, and Dawn clicked Astral Barrage every turn, but then the Farigiraf just clicked Trick Room safely, and then all of a sudden now the Calyrex has to play defense.
From the looks of it now, I think that's the adaptation that Dylan went for, is finding a way to basically just set up a Trick Room, which isn't even that safe of a gambit right now, given that Clefairy is in the lead because of After You.
Yeah, so one big thing to note is that Dylan's Amoonguss does have Protect. That's something we've been talking about earlier today as well, that not all the Amoongusses have Protect. Some of them are going for like 2 attacks, Rage Powder, and Spore. So it's not as safe for Dawn to just try to hit the Amoonguss here. And if the Amoonguss wants to, it can underspeed the Clefairy. Whether or not it actually will, we'll have to see in Trick Room, but a Amoonguss trained to be as slow as it wants can underspeed Clefairy, so it would be able to get around potential After You shenanigans. Or just be able to like Spore into certain slots or Rage Powder, or,
I think finding a way to shut down specifically the Clefairy from facilitating the rest of Dawn's team in Trick Room is going to be an important thing to do if Dylan wants to try to push the Trick Room.
Oh,
we
have a disconnect inside of Terrestrialization. That is a little unfortunate. It didn't look like anybody was messing with cords or switches or anything. So we'll have to get to the root cause of that. Staff is going to be on that, and the players. So
it was turn 1 before like any moves were locked or anything. So I think it's just going to be treated as just a null game you play back.
Possibly. We will find out what the ruling is going to be. So it may just be a replay. It might be change-ups. I'm not exactly sure at this point. It's a little bit of a peculiar time for it to disconnect, but that's kind of how it goes sometimes. So just bear with us. We will get it figured out. and we'll try to get back into this. So currently, Don is up 1 game over Dylan. Looks like the rest of the matches are plugging along a little bit. So
Can
both
we talk about like just how strong like the Ursaluna is?
Yeah.
Like here we were talking about how it did not come before. We were like wondering like where is the matchup that you see it coming along in?
Well, turns out this was the matchup.
Yeah, Terra Normal Blood Moon just does a lot. Like,
yep. It one-shot the Incineroar. It knocked out the Urshifu at -1, obviously, with close combat, but still, it knocked out the Urshifu, dealt a bunch of damage to the Calyrex. Like, I
wouldn't be surprised if that original play was going to be like a Terra Normal Blood Moon into either target. Even into the Calyrex. If you just click Helping Hand Blood Moon,
yeah,
I don't even know if that would live.
The thing
or
is,
if that would hang on.
Typically, Ursaluna Blood Moon is like a slow. In the past, it has been deployed as a like slow, bulky, like Trick Room threat itself.
Given Don's team, though, I agree with you that I think it's
probably
trained
fast.
to be fast.
Yeah. So the thing is that a lot of times Ursaluna Blood Moon has now become something where you kind of just use it as an anti-Trick Room check, to where, if your opponent's playing not necessarily even hard Trick Room, this is not a hard Trick Room team by any stretch of the imagination. However, a team that clearly has a game plan where they're just going to be slower than you most of the time, you can just kind of use Ursaluna with either, some sort of disruption like Fake Out, Follow Me, After You, or just pair it with something else that hits really hard. And, if you want to go into Trick Room and be slower than me, fine, but you're going to take a lot of damage to get into Trick Room. And
it's something we've seen as, like, I would consider to be a weakness of Calyrex Ice is, like, you don't need it to be in Trick Room, but it reaches peak performance in Trick Room.
It functions so much better. And there's certain matchups where you can't play it without Trick Room, for sure.
And in all honesty, if you can't get Calyrex to, specifically if Calyrex is like your method that you need to set up the Trick Room with because nothing else can tank something, then it puts you in a very precarious situation where you're using your high value, high damage Pokemon to set itself up.
Yeah.
When usually if you look at a lot of these teams, it's like Far Giraffe, it's I didn't see any today, but Porygon 2 is another one that does that.
There's a lot of current team building is you just play like a bunch of Pokemon that are self-sufficient in damage, and then you just play like a couple of like minimal damage support Pokemon. Some teams obviously do that a little bit differently. Like you look at like your Incin, Amoonguss, Calyrex, the bread and butter like Japan Balance, or the evolution of that, or even looking back in like prior generations like Rinyasun, where like you can have like relatively low damage teams, but like one of the most consistent teams you're just gonna be able to build from scratch is just like 4 damage dealers and 2 like pure supports.
I feel like you've even seen that, like just that sort of building mode, even in like previous regulations in this format or in this game.
Yeah, for sure.
For example, a team that comes to mind is Ragav Malavia's, I believe Sacramento team, the one that was it was the Ninetales Baxcalibur and Snow, where you played Ninetales mainly as like the speed control disruptive.
Aurora Veil, Icy Wind, Blizzard, whatever.
And then you played the Heatran in that team as like you lock something in on the field and then
and you just kind of chip it down.
Yeah. It's kind of like what you're saying before. You play in a more like supportive role. Yeah. That helps facilitate the rest of the team.
Yeah, for sure. So both players are getting set back up, setting up their game. Not sure what the resolution is going to be in terms of leads and play, but we'll figure that out. That's up to them. They'll figure it out when they get there. So for now, just looking at the matchup, going back to it, Don just has a lot of damage that he can present really, really fast. And basically, it's just going to be up to Dylan. What is Dylan going to do to kind of mitigate the onslaught? Because Don showed just how devastating Ursaluna Blood Moon can be if you're just going to let it click all of its moves repetitively. So it's really just going to be up to Dylan to what can he do to make the Ursaluna not want to click all its moves? What can you do to make it protect? What can you do to make it switch out? What's it going to be?
I think the unsung hero of Don's entire team today and even yesterday has been Clefairy.
Yeah.
I think
And like, I mean, that's just kind of how Clefairy is. It just doesn't deal damage, but like, it does so much without dealing damage. Like,
just
it does
by existing.
It does everything but deal damage, and like, but it does everything else so well. Especially with the new After You tech that people have developed recently.
Oh yeah, as like a Trick Room tech, like especially in Calyrex teams, because you take you take the fastest relevant Pokemon on the format.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, hey, it's actually kind of okay in Trick Room.
Yeah. So, okay, looking at it, looks like both players did same leads. I believe at the time it had disconnected, we had a Terrestrial normal Ursaluna, so it looks like they were probably just agreeing to replay exactly as they were playing.
Either that, or they probably
that, or they just flowcharted it. But I'm assuming, like, I'm gonna assume it was probably an agreement. That being said,
who's taking this Blood Moon, and do they take it?
Yeah, exactly.
The answer to that question is yes, and do they take it? No.
I think we all know the answer to that. Maybe. We'll see.
What are you gonna do? Switching your Ghost type?
Yeah, exactly. There's no normal resists here. I mean, that's one of the cool things about Ursaluna Blood Moon is, like, looking over the team sheet, there is literally 0 normal resist. So Blood Moon, unless you hit into a Protect, is gonna deal a lot of damage.
That'd be the concern, is really just hitting into a Protect.
Yeah,
but,
I mean that you know, that's the read. Is like, what are we gonna do? Okay, so the Amoonguss is gonna Rage Powder. So it looks like
a Trick Room setup.
Yeah, it looks like it's just gonna be a forced Trick Room setup, because I'm pretty sure the Amoonguss doesn't live this. If it does, then all right, cool. But yeah, that's just gonna be a one-hit knockout. The Amoonguss goes down. So I'm assuming this is probably gonna be a Trick Room follow-up. But oh no, it's just gonna be Glacial Lance. Okay, so, you know, honestly, fine. Still gets a bunch of damage down. You know, the Clefairy's in 2-hit range, so another Glacial Lance will knock it out. So you can kind of still, from Dylan's perspective, just try to force a bunch of damage.
I think I agree from Dylan's perspective. As much as Trick Room seems like a very tantalizing option here, the Clefairy being on the field is a huge problem to your Trick Room mode.
Yeah.
Because of the After You tech.
Yeah, that's reasonable. From Don's perspective, last game he got away with double protecting in this exact instance. I am inclined to assume that he can probably do it again. But, you know, Dylan could have like a cheeky switch here. Don could have a cheeky attack. You know, there's a lot of different ways to play this, especially given we were in a relatively similar scenario last time. We'll just have to see what they come up with. So it's just going to be a Protect. I'm assuming probably going to be a Clefairy Protect right here. Yep. So the big question for the rest of this turn is, we're going to get Fake Out from Instant, and are we getting Glacial Lance or Trick Room? And it's going to be Trick Room this time. Okay. So that's a big thing, because now the Clefairy can click after you, but if it's clicking after you, it's not clicking Helping Hand. And if it's clicking Helping Hand, it's not clicking after you. Assuming this Ursaluna is very, very fast, which we've already seen that it's generally going to be pretty fast.
The concern would be is, do you think either of these Pokemon are able to just sustain the damage from a Terra Normal Blood Moon regardless?
The Calyrex, I would very much assume, survives. The Ensign would be... It really just depends on how it's trained. That being said, we're going to see a After You Blood Moon into the Calyrex Ice Rider. A lot of damage, and it does take that hit. Wow. So that's going to be Return Fire from the Calyrex. This could be a double knockout here.
It's looking...
It's a single... Okay, it's a single knockout for Calyrex, but the Ensign, I'm assuming, is going to be following up with an attack here.
It's actually pretty big for Don that if you're having a double KO happen to you this turn, that it's not a +2 on the Calyrex. Yeah. You can at least
yeah. So at least there's some counterplay to that.
Like, you can stomach +1 a little bit.
Yeah. So we get a knockoff there, and then yeah, it's going to be double choice item in the back for Don. So he was really kind of planning on being able to play through the Trick Room mode. And the Calyrex living that is honestly really, really big game right there.
It's actually really good information to know if you're Dylan in this scenario, because it means if you find yourself in a similar position next game, that means that the Clefairy is forced to click Helping Hand to pick up the KO there.
Yeah. Yep. So Basically, Don has, he can click Aqua Jet. Let's click Aqua Jet. That's cool. We're gonna see a switch out here.
I see Dylan bringing in Bar Draft to cover exactly that.
Yeah, like I think you probably could have just Terra anyway, like Terra Water, just to like not have that happen. But I guess if critical hit on Calyrex, that might have mattered a lot because I'm not sure that actually knocked out without that. That being said, you know, we get the crit here, so you know we're gonna be going on to game 3 here. No hope for the Urshifu having to click Aqua Jet for the rest of the game. So yeah, really good comeback from Dylan to adjust and figure out, you know, specifically just what did he want to do to try to get back into this game. And it turns out sacrificing your Moongus on turn 1, I guess that was exactly what it wanted to do.
It's actually really funny looking at that because we figured it was going to be Trick Room from the word go, but
and then then just click the Calyrex just click Glacial Lance, and that was all that they needed.
They just needed a little bit of damage in order to start making like situations in order to make Don's situation very dicey.
Yep. Glacial Lance being a 2-hit knockout on the Clefairy is also extremely big. The Clefairy with the Eviolite item can be very, very bulky. Not specifically sure how it's trained beyond typically the maximum amount of HP you can put on them.
I would like to assume you typically split it enough between like you can train enough for specific stats that you would want to be able to hang on for certain moves. And Clefairy, the biggest thing about Clefairy is, like you were saying, it does everything but deal damage.
Yeah.
And
so you kind of
as long as Clefairy stays on the field, Clefairy is able to just basically like make the life of whatever it's supporting so much easier because it's what we were talking about with Necrozma in the first round, where Clefairy basically takes that, like how Prism Armor works.
Yep.
Applies it to all moves directed specifically at the ally.
Yeah.
So it's just like...
And then it can also just soak up damage. You know, if the damage is going to be too much, it can just soak it up itself with Follow Me. So...
Oh, yeah. And...
Looks like it's... So, you know, we're getting into game 3 here. It's going to be an interesting adaptation for Don.
I saw what Don had picked in the...
Yeah, if Don led what I thought he did, this is going to be really interesting. Yeah. So Don just made a call that he didn't think Pelipper was worth it from Dylan's side, and now he's just going to be rewarded with a ton of pressure, just threatening. You know, he's going to be faster than both Pokemon on Dylan's side. He's just going to be able to threaten double spread moves. The big way to get around this is Pelipper, but with no Pelipper, there's really not a whole lot of counterplay to, you know, what's being presented here. Really just going to depend on which offensive Terastallization do you want, and it looks like it's going to be Terastal Ghost on the count. Oh, no. Maybe he's going to do it the other way.
I'm partial towards the idea.
I like that, so that way the Urshifu follow-up is a little less punishing.
Not only that, but also in some world, if the Calyrex Ice Rider like holds on, what this means is that you get punished less from the Glacial Lance.
Makes sense. That being said, this is just a ton of damage. Like, this is one of the ways around if your opponent is trying to do redirection plus set up Trick Room or redirection plus click Glacial Lance. Just go around the redirection with the 2 biggest threats that you have. These are 2 very, very big threats.
Can't redirect an explosion.
Basically, yeah. So we're going to see Terastallizations from both ends. The Calyrex is just going to do its best to hold on. You know, I mean, Calyrex Ice Rider is basically
we've seen it hang on from some very stupid attacks.
We've seen it live some very ludicrous results.
We just got Live Terra Normal Blood Moon last game.
Yeah, so it's going to be a Specs Barrage coming in, Astral Barrage dealing a bunch of damage.
That might actually tank.
That might hold on. If it does, then that's potentially set winning. It does. Oh my goodness! How did it do that? That's crazy.
That's Trick Room?
Yeah, I'm assuming that's going to be Trick Room right here. No, it's just going to be a Glacial Lance again. Interesting. I'm not as sure about that. Because, like, now you get in something...
If that was Trick Room, your position was so huge there.
Yeah, like, I mean, again, potentially Urshifu comes in and threatens a lot of damage here. So I don't hate that.
Thing is,
however,
I do not blame you for Dylan in that scenario. If you played so much around the Ursaluna game 1, only for it to still put on as much of a show as it did.
Now the problem is there's no Urshifu here. So the Incineroar can fake out the Calyrex, but who cares? Calyrex is still just going to be spitting out a ton of damage here. The Incineroar doesn't have any healing. Yeah, so, like, for Dawn, he's still in a, this is...
I think Dawn still has the upper hand
This
here.
is not an unlosable situation, but, like, and now you're switching out in front of the double sweepers.
The thing that scares me the most out of all of that was, like, I don't blame Dylan being very nervous in that scenario because he had so much of a problem with Blood Moon in the first game.
Yeah.
And then
so here comes a Blood
Moon
Game
2, you got a very dicey win out of it.
Yeah.
So I don't blame you for getting basically very nervous when he leads his 2 most damaging Pokemon from the word go.
Yeah. So we get a Farigiraf switch in, which does, prevent Astral Barrage from dealing any damage to it. But the follow-up from Dawn is just a lot of damage out, and the Blood Moon in means that... So the Calyrex is locked into...
Astral Barrage.
The Calyrex is locked into Astral Barrage, so it doesn't really do anything there. However, this is a really, really strong switch in here. Dawn can basically just make sure that he gets into Trick Room with... Ideally, he's going to get into Trick Room with Clefairy and Ursaluna, which is going to generate a lot of pressure back on, especially if the Calyrex goes for Protect, if the Calyrex Ice Rider goes for Protect here. Like, Trick Room here is what makes sense for Dylan, but yeah, so you get a Protect out of Calyrex. This is kind of the play that Dylan had to go for, but Dawn just has really good counterplay to that into this After You Clefairy. As long as the After You Clefairy is, trained to be slower than both of these Pokemon, it's just going to be a lot of damage here.
I'm led to believe that's the case because that's one specific niche that Clefairy has had.
That's the whole point of running After You Clefairy, is to underspeed Pokemon like Calyrex Ice Rider and to be able to, put a bunch of damage down on it and go into Trick Room and then put a bunch of damage down on it before it gets to move again. But we do get a double protect. We do get a double protect. Okay. Interesting. So we get the After You. We get the After You Hyper Voice.
Unfortunately, I don't think this really changes much, just because...
So the thing is that... yeah, I mean, like...
Dylan could reset Trick Room, is like the only thing I can think of.
Well, if you go back out of Trick Room, then the Blood Moon is just... The Ursaluna Blood Moon is just faster. So we get Psychic. Psychic is going to knock out the Ursaluna. So the thing is now Calyrex Shadow Rider comes back in and can... I guess you don't want to lock into Astral Barrage, do you? So now it's just, can the Calyrex get a triple protect? Because I think that's the angle, is try to go for a triple protect on the Calyrex Ice Rider, and just I don't know what else you can do at this point.
I think you have to basically call either of, do you think it's Pollen Puff coming in, or do you think it's if you think it's Astral Barrage, I think you go for the triple. I think if you think it's Pollen Puff coming in, then I think you go for the...
I think with already having resolved double protect, I think you just have to assume that they're not going to hit a triple protect. And if you lose to a triple protect in game 3, then like, all right, sure, buddy. Like,
yeah, that's one of the things that's they played to their out.
Yeah, like what you going to do about that? So it remains to be seen if they'll actually go for that line, because locking the Calyrex into Astral Barrage does mean that the Farigiraf doesn't take any damage this turn. So, there's still layers to this.
It looked like Dawn clicked Pollen Puff into the Calyrex.
That would probably also be wise. Yep, okay, so that makes sense. Going for a triple protect would have been really risky, obviously, but, given the position that Dylan was in, I wonder if that's maybe what he should have gone for. But, he's the one in the seat, not us, so, you live with your decisions. So as is, this is just going to be closing out the game. You're just going to get a Follow Me and a Pollen Puff, or After You and a Pollen Puff, and that's going to wrap things up for Dawn Check, I believe.
Call that a checkmate.
Yep, call that a checkmate. Good congratulations to Dylan for the top 8. A little critical hit to, really close things out. So Dylan will wrap up with a top 8 finish. You know, good for some points. I'm not sure if he's chasing an invite this year. But still, you know, top 8 in MSS, you know, nothing wrong with that.
Oh yeah, that's gonna be about like some of the highest level competition you see before like you actually go to the regional level.
Yeah, and there's plenty. You know, this was a smaller MSS comparatively, but it's still a competitive field. A lot of good players here locally.
I mean,
but
we saw Don's repertoire whenever
yeah,
whenever they were showing the players.
Yep.
You've seen that he's day 2 various.
He's been there. He's been there, done that.
Top 4 Daytona. He's qualified for Worlds.
Yep.
Like, he's, in all honesty, very good competitor to just go up against. Even like if you're in Dylan's position, the fact that you took him to a game 3, and
I mean,
like,
Don just basically had a very, very aggressive read that, you know, if there's a Pelipper there, then all of a sudden it gets really awkward. And then, you know, then it's like you're just basically playing 50-50s against each other. Like, do you click protect?
Yeah.
Do you click wide guard?
But if there was no Pelipper there, like what just happened, then you basically put Dylan in such a precarious position where I do think that if you got the trick room off early because the Clefairy wasn't on field, you could have gotten rid of both of the damage dealers to be like just from that point. And at that point, it's on Dawn to basically, because we've seen the last one was never shown, but since we see from like one player's perspective, we saw that it was Palmot in the back.
Yeah.
It would put the onus on Palmot to actually tank both of the attacks from the double up to actually revive one of them.
Yeah, which honestly, shout out Calyrex Ice Rider for just being a messed up Pokemon and living the Terranormal
That was